Thank you everybody for coming. Okay, so is our camera happening?
It is happening.
Okay,
We are on
hello
it.
Facebook. Just use your outside voice. I think both of these ladies will be able to
We've
do
spent
that.
a lot of time outside the
Yeah,
two
I
of us,
think
so
so.
we're probably
So
okay.
basically, here's what we're going to do. Here's the plan I've come up with. First of all, I'm Renegade. I'm with our Revolution Oklahoma. I hope Susan talked about that in a second.
No, but that's good. It's probably better.
Our Revolution Oklahoma is a chapter of the National Our Revolution, which of course grew out of the Bernie Sanders campaign. We're a progressive organization working to organize Oklahoma and make things more progressive here. And we very much appreciate our candidates for SD40 being willing to join us tonight, and for all of you as well. Here's the format we're going to work with. We're going to have opening statements of 3 minutes each, and I'm going to attempt to time them, but I'd ask our candidates to just keep things brief as possible. And then I have some questions that I'm going to pose for each of the candidates. They'll each get the same question, and they will have 3 minutes for each response. And then when those are done, we're going to have some questions from the audience for a few minutes. And then we'll have closing statements, again, 3 minutes each for each candidate. And at the end, we'll have announcements. The candidates can make announcements about any upcoming events they have that they're encouraging volunteers to participate in. And then any of you have anything that you want to share that would be of interest to Oklahoma progressives, we would invite you to share that at the very end. Any questions about that? All right. So I'm going to ask let me get my timer up here, and I'll try not to be too much of a badass about this, but we don't want you to go on all that long. Okay, but hold on, let me. All right, so we're going to do opening statements, and we'll start alphabetically. So Danielle will go first.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming. I'm Danielle Ezelle. I wanted to tell you, I think I'll mess up the camera footage if I stand Mary Jo, but thank you. I wanted to share with you the minute that I decided to run. That was at the end of May 2015. I was in the Senate gallery. I was sitting between Kendra Horn and Debbie Hogue Downing, and we were there to celebrate. We were there to celebrate the passage of House Bill 2929, an equal pay bill that we worked with Jason Dunnington on. It had gone through 8 votes already, so it was going to be a formality that day. We had the votes lined up. We were ready to bring equal pay to women in Oklahoma, and the gavel came down, and we adjourned just a few minutes before noon. Without the bill being heard, we died, and I was crushed. And the reason why we adjourned that day was to avoid hearing a very discriminatory and embarrassing bathroom bill, which I agree, we needed to adjourn and avoid that embarrassment and scandal yet again that session. However, women paid the price that day. And what I realized in that moment was that I was never again going to be not only at the table, but on the table. I was going to be at the table and not part of the meal going forward. I wanted more control in helping pass legislation in Oklahoma. You see, that session had been a great session. I was leading the Oklahoma Women's Coalition. We passed a bill that helped give minors access to a rape exam if they had been assaulted. We fought the cutting of a child care tax credit that would have hurt working families. We passed bills that were going to hopefully reduce female incarceration rates. We passed bills to help domestic violence victims. But I had a hard time focusing on those successes because the equal pay bill had died. And it died not because it was a bad bill and not because we all didn't care about it, but because yet again there was one individual with their own agenda up at the Capitol wasting our time. So it was in that moment that I decided to run for office. And I knew, having been up there, that my leadership experience, my corporate background, being a former small business owner, my ability to negotiate and strategize would all be helpful. I also had experience as a single working parent, a caregiver to my ailing mother, a classroom volunteer as a reading buddy at Gatewood, a classroom volunteer with junior achievement at all levels, a former UCO adjunct professor, and community leader. I knew a lot about what was happening in the state and the problems we were facing. So it was in that moment then that I decided to run. I went on and worked for the coalition for another year, advocating for women and girls in our community, helping work on bills such as the shared paid family leave bill that actually passed this year with Kay Floyd, and many others. So I am so glad that you're here tonight to ask us questions and learn more about us. This district is very important to our future here in Oklahoma and very winnable by a Democrat. So thank you.
I think with the Mary Jo interaction, that was pretty good.
If you guys want to stand, you can.
Okay, I wasn't sure. So.
Yeah, it's up to you.
Well, my roots run deep in Oklahoma. I'm a fourth generation Oklahoman. I've lived here all of my life. I studied political science at Oklahoma City University, and I've been active in politics since I was a college student. When working on my master's in leadership management in 2008, I had the opportunity to take a course in Washington, D.C. during the inauguration of President Barack Obama. It was such a thrill to stand in the National Mall with hundreds of thousands of Americans. And on that freezing cold morning, to see President Barack Obama sworn into office, I remember being in awe of the impact that President Obama had made on our country. The difference that just one person with passion and conviction can make. But it wasn't until I became a teacher, and later then a parent to a child with a chronic disease, that I decided that maybe I could be that one person to make a difference. Making the decision to run for state senate was a very easy one for me. Our community and our state need change. It was in my second year, I'm referencing my colleague over here from Two Lakes Elementary, teaching kindergarten, that one of my 5-year-old students paid the price for what's going on in our communities. She was at home, she was right where she was supposed to be, and she should have been safe inside the walls of her apartment. But a stray bullet came through the wall and shot her in the leg. And that is absolutely deplorable, that people are sitting by and letting that injustice happen to our children. So with the unique perspective of a classroom teacher and the passion of a teacher's heart, I am honored to be a candidate for State Senate District 40.
Okay. I failed to read the introductions I've written, but I have a feeling you guys all either know them, have gone to the websites and read that. So unless there's an absolute clamor for me to read those, I'm going to just amplify and get right to the questions. And I tried to write some questions that were a little unusual and might, elicit some content in the answers that will really allow us to get to know these women better. So if they're a flop, I can take again responsibility for them. But I think they're awesome, of course. And we're gonna go back and forth as far as who goes first, and we're gonna start with Danielle going first on this first question. And here's the question: focusing on your own experience, positions, and beliefs, and considering what you have learned about your primary opponent during this campaign, how are you different from your opponent in ways that will impact your work as a legislator if elected?
Thanks. Well, I think as two female Democrats, we're likely, if elected, to vote very similarly. And so I tell people that all the time. You really can't go wrong with either of us, right? We will likely vote the way you would like. However, I have been up at the Capitol working the last few years as an advocate for women and girls in our state. I've been serving on the board for Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform and worked on State Question 780 and 781. I've been a longtime community volunteer, a senior executive at a major corporation. And those skills and experience bring me to the Capitol in a position to hit the ground running day one working for you. Our state has very serious issues, and we need people that can get to work immediately, that understand the system,
understand the players, and have successfully passed legislation or stopped it in many cases over the last few years.
Yeah, I didn't know how
Oh,
long.
no, yeah,
Okay.
there'll be a noise if you go over. So.
Okay.
All right.
And just as Danielle mentioned, you know, that is kind of the beauty of this race, is that you do have two female candidates that are poised and positioned and ready to hit the ground running. I've served as a legislative liaison for the Oklahoma Education Association for the past several years. And in that position, it's my role to go through and vet out legislation that would be harmful to education and helpful to education. I understand the process very intimately, and while I probably am the legislative outsider in this race, and I might not have as many close relationships at the Capitol, what I think we need are new faces and a heavy dose of change. So I think truly, you know, we differ in that aspect directly. I've also worked with hundreds of college-age females across the state, and not only that, nationally, in developing, I guess, their own platform with the Alpha Phi Foundation. And I've spent a lot of time pouring back into the community that invested in me as a leader. And so while I might not have invested in the Capitol politics yet, that's where I'm headed, because that's where I feel like I can be the biggest asset to those organizations moving forward.
Question, yeah.
Yeah, we're just gonna have to.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. If anyone has not set their phone to vibrate, please do that. All right. Question 2, and Carri will go first on this one. When elected, if you could choose anyone at the Capitol to be your mentor and help guide you through the learning curve of being a new legislator, who would it be and why?
I love this question. Kate Floyd is just, I mean, pardon that phrase, but she's just a badass. I have looked up to her in so many ways, just kicking down the door and paving the way for other females to come and stand in that realm. So, you know, I would absolutely call on her experience, and in many ways she has kind of, you know, given us kind of an insight on what it takes to be a female candidate. And believe me, you've got to have some really thick skin, which is what I've developed over a year now in on this race. Beyond that, you know, Cindy Munson, Emily Virgin, I mean, these are girls and women and proud females that I am honored to call friends. And so I just hope that I'll be standing side by side and shoulder to shoulder as we continue to move the state forward.
The first person that came to my mind was also Kay. I've worked with her on legislation the past few years, and I always speak of her in the example as a role model, because what most of you don't see publicly every day is that woman gets a lot done behind the scenes. She knows when I've gone to her and said, I want to see this bill passed that will help women and girls in our state. She very humbly says, well, this is how we're going to get it done. My name can't be on it. Let's go talk to Senator Griffin, and these are the other people we're going to talk to, and she gets a lot done that she never gets credit for. So we should all applaud her and thank her next time we see her. She is a model for how to be a minority Democrat and still move legislation forward. In addition to that, though, I think we have several male examples as well, and in particular in our freshman class, where we see Mickey Dollins, Colin Walke, and Forrest Bennett really showing the power of being a freshman and still being able to be a voice for people and getting stuff done. I think they are a great example of kind of telling the old school folks of, no, we're not going to do it that way, and we will not stand for these games, and we are going to move forward.
All right, thank you. Question 3, and Danielle, you'll go first on this one. What one bill debated in the 2017-2018 session would you most like to have voted on? How would you have voted? And what would you have said to the other legislators to persuade them to vote your way?
Just one? Oh my golly. Probably, I mean, there's so many. Senate Bill 1140. I'm tempted to say the equal pay bill because I'm so passionate about it and have worked on it so long, but it died early in committee. But, Senate Bill 1140 that was ended up getting passed, the governor signed it, very disappointing to see such discriminatory bill using taxpayer dollars pass out of committee, and certainly does nothing to help the state in any meaningful way going forward. So very frustrating to see that bill move forward, passed, and a waste of our time and money and resources going forward, and just embarrassing. I mean, we've seen California in this last week ban travel by state employees to the state, and just any number of embarrassment and poor economic impact to us. So a horrible use of our time and resources here in the state this session. But that's sadly one of many.
I would have most liked to have been able to vote on the revenue packages. I truly think that Oklahoma has a major budget crisis and a major budget problem. And so, one of my top priorities is going to be looking towards sustainable, recurring revenue that's responsible. Because truly, I think when you look at whether it's mental health, criminal justice, reforms, and making sure that we've got rehabilitation services readily available, and obviously being able to attract and retain quality teachers in our state, it underlines a huge problem with our budget. And so looking truly at what kind of efforts we're going to take moving forward that aren't going to be on the backs of working class families like mine, because we've got to make sure that we are taking care of our neighbors. And right now in Oklahoma, we're not doing a great job of that.
And how about Scott Inman bringing up the capital gains exemption bill every single day? Good for him.
Okay, question 4, and Carrie will go first on this one. As an adult, have you ever significantly altered your position on a policy issue? If so, please elaborate on that change. Or if not, how have your steadfast positions been confirmed over time?
Yeah, it is. I'm glad you're going first.
I know, right?
Good luck.
A lot of my positions have changed over the years, and I'm not embarrassed to say that. I think it shows maturity, if nothing else. Becoming a parent and obviously a child with disabilities, my personal connection to the medical community has just been eyes wide open. I'm really, really disheartened that our state has not opted into the expanded Medicaid package. It just makes sense that with our federal dollars that we would be using them here at home. And I think any number of medical related issues have obviously been transformed into living those struggles day to day on how we're going to be able to afford insulin this month, on how we're going to be able to get a new drum kit for his finger pricker. There's just so many things that you have to be able to budget that you can't even anticipate with a chronic illness. And so, a lot of my positions have changed in the medical community, and I will be proud to be that voice inside the state legislature to make sure that all Oklahomans are going to be taken care of.
No, I don't think my positions have really changed. I was raised by two very liberal feminist grandmothers, and I was a lifelong Democrat from the get-go. So I came by my progressivism and my feminism pretty naturally. So those positions haven't changed. I think what has happened is I thought I was a very engaged voter and community member and citizen until I got up to the Capitol. And it really opened up my eyes to the challenges here in the state that I wasn't as aware of as I thought I was. I didn't know that our uncompensated care fund wasn't being properly funded. I heard the stats about criminal justice reform, but until I really dug in and heard testimony from individuals about fees and fines that they were getting stuck with and what was happening in our prison system and being the highest for both male and female incarceration rates, I just, once your eyes are open to those things, you can't close them again. Medicaid expansion and the need for that, we are we have facilities that barely have 1 week's cash flow to keep their doors open at the moment. The other thing I learned that I just had no idea, Kara mentioned healthcare coverage. We need to expand Medicare, but I had no idea the number that most insurance mandates and decisions happen at the state level. And these folks can't get classroom books into our classrooms. I sure don't want them deciding what's going to be covered by my insurance carrier going forward.
Okay, you guys are being so concise, I'm going to give you plenty of time on this next question. So just go to town on it. Who are your political heroes, living or dead, and what about them inspires you? And Danielle will go first.
I have to go first.
I probably can't, I shouldn't use the K Floyd a second time.
No.
Oh gosh, so many. Probably, it comes to mind, and like probably so many of you in this room, I recently saw the Ruth Bader Ginsburg movie, so she's top of mind for me at the moment. And they didn't mention it in the movie, but I so admire her because she was such an early pioneer with the ACLU on women's issues. And one of the great stories that I'd heard a podcast about her, she is strategic, and she understood that incremental change along the way got us where we needed to go. And one example of that was a case out of Stillwater that had to do with, I didn't know this, in the early 70s, mid 70s here in Oklahoma, some of you lived through this, women could buy beer at 18 because we were so much more responsible than our male counterparts. And so, that drive-through barn in Stillwater, not that I've ever been there, but where you could drive through and buy your beer. There are two college students, took a case to court for reverse discrimination, that they couldn't buy their beer. And Ruth got involved with that case. It ended up going to the Supreme Court, and it helped better define gender inequality and disparity in this reverse discrimination case. I mean, how smart is that? And so I love her strategy of how to move the needle, and I just so admire those stories from her through the early 70s. I mean, it couldn't have been easy at all, and I think it's a wonderful role model for all of us about the change one person can make in our community.
She's also one of our family's personal favorites. My daughter likes to wear her RBG is my homegirl onesie all the time. Yes, she's fantastic. We were talking earlier about how to legislate from a minority party. And I'm really fortunate to call Kim and Brad Henry personal friends. And I think what they brought to the table and what I feel like we need right now in Oklahoma is just that steadfast leadership. They were steady in their beliefs, and they stuck to their guns, and they did not waver in their support for working class families and education. And so they happen to be, some of my personal friends, but also political heroes in the fact that they put Oklahoma on a better trajectory, and then obviously we know what happened after that.
Okay. Now, as was mentioned, this was touched on a bit, but this question will give you a little bit more opportunity to go into depth. Democrats will continue to be the minority party in the Oklahoma State Legislature for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. If elected, how do you plan to create opportunities for passing legislation that matters to you, and what do you believe is the responsibility of the Minority Caucus and its members? And Carri will go first.
As a classroom teacher, we always stress the importance of collaboration and cooperation and working together. And so I think what we are doing a really, really good job at right now in our state legislature is being selfish. I think that the leadership right now is protecting its own self-interest. And so I think I bring a unique skill set in being able to navigate some of those very difficult political conversations and getting people to share.
and getting people to be open-minded. Because it is unfortunate, obviously, that we will continue to maybe be in the minority. I'm also very optimistic in that we've got some wonderful seats that can flip that. Maybe not in this coming election cycle, but definitely soon. And so I think that, truly what we need to see is developing those partnerships. And what I think, at least what I see my students struggle with the most, is that we've lost the art of debate. And so I was so excited, obviously, to have this event tonight to kind of highlight the fact that you can disagree or you can agree on different issues, but it needs to be with decorum and respect and from a place of understanding. And so I think that that's really what I bring to the table, is trying to figure out, what is motivating or what is driving these policies, and how can I be an effective leader, not only in the Senate, but obviously across the chambers and the House, and backing legislation that is going to be meaningful. And I mean, I know that there are enough currently serving leaders that also want that, at least those that are serving and didn't draw opponents in this coming election cycle, highlight the fact that, cooperation and collaboration and being somewhat open-minded to hearing each other out and figuring out where we can come to that common ground, I think is going to be absolutely essential for whoever serves in this role.
Well, this is something that I've been doing for the last several years with the Women's Coalition. We're a bipartisan group with a staunchly bipartisan board, and every issue we took on, we leaned a little bit more progressive, as you get into women's issues, and had that perception. But we were able to get a lot passed thanks to my ability to bring coalitions together and work across the aisle and bring together interested parties. So whether that was with the faith-based community and Voice and Oklahoma Policy and a number of other partners coming together to fight predatory lending 2 years ago, to working with the board on Oklahoma's for Criminal Justice Reform, which is about the coolest initiative we have going on in the state. If you go to one of those meetings, it's really gratifying to walk in and see the business community, Republicans and Democrats, the social service organizations, and community activists together in the room, working together to move the needle forward and make this a great place. So we have examples in this state where that happens. Now, unfortunately, and it didn't happen with education this year, but we have people and examples and things going on where we are moving forward and we can come together. The other thing I like to talk about is, no, we will not be able to influence a vote on the Senate floor if we're elected. We hope that we'll pick up many seats, but we will never be able to change a vote probably in this next term. What we can do, and what is important, is that there are a lot of times I've been sitting in a Senate committee meeting before the bills ever get to the floor, and there's not a woman in the room. There may be only one Democrat at the table, and now those opportunities, it is critical for us to increase our numbers so that we can stop legislation before it ever hits the floor, or we can advocate for a bill, or we can ask the questions that you and I want asked in that committee meeting and make the points. I cannot tell you how many times I texted questions or statements or facts into the table. And there just needs to be more of us. And the more diversity in the room, the better the results will be going forward.
Okay, this question is sort of in the same vein. In theory, compromise is central to working as a legislator for the best policy outcomes. But it's also important to adhere to the values you live by and that you ran on. What is a position or value you hold that you would not compromise? And Danielle will go first.
So many. Discrimination, probably. I mean, that would be my number one. I don't, in any way, whether that's gender, race, religion, sexual preference, there should never be discrimination. And I will stand up for that and fight for that day in and day out. It's so fundamentally and morally against what I believe in as a Christian that I feel compelled that I must be the voice in the room for others who aren't there. As a corporate executive, I was one of our highest level executives here in Oklahoma City for Teleflora, and part of our executive team. I had to frequently be the voice of the workers who weren't in the room. And it's incredibly important to be there fighting for people whose voice isn't represented always. And there are so many issues like that at the Capitol. And too often we see the special interest groups influencing elected officials. And I just feel so strongly that coming out of a corporate environment where I had to fight for other people, owning my own business, working as a community activist, I am not going to bend in the wind with whether that's the party caucus going a direction I don't believe in or special interest groups. I mean, I've worked too hard to get to this. Once elected, I've worked way too hard to get there, to not do the right thing and to hold true to my value system.
Well, I know this is probably going to be a surprise, but obviously I won't bend on public ed. I will not back down on fighting for my students. I think it's very disheartening that people think they know what's happening in public education, but until you've been in a room that is crowded with tiny bodies and no supplies, and you've had to make it work. You've had to put on a really good show and teach something, right? Anything. You don't know what it feels like. I moved into flexible seating to put on a good face in my classroom. Flexible seating just means that we don't have desks and chairs for each student. It's flexible in that they can sit on a bouncy ball, they can lay on their bellies, they can use a clipboard, they can sit on crates, I've got stools. It makes it more of a home environment. And this is what teachers are forced to do. We put on a great face. And the reason I moved to alternative and flexible seating is because there were going to be 28 students in a room that was specifically designed for 18. Now that might not sound like that much, but when you put 10 extra bodies in an environment where they're literally right on top of one another, and developmentally appropriate is getting them up and moving them around and having a good time, interacting with material, you literally cannot breathe in that environment. I had a student break his nose in my classroom because it was so crowded. I will not bend and I will not back down on what is needed to be successful in this state, because having 2,000 emergency certified professionals standing at the front of those classrooms, impacting a generation of Oklahomans, is absolutely deplorable.
All right, once you are sworn in to represent SD 40, and we're thinking positive here, what legislation would you like to write to begin your legislative career? We'll begin with Carri.
Thank you. I've actually put a lot of thought into this, and I've been consulting a lot of folks because, you know, I am ready to hit the ground running as soon as I get elected. And classroom sizes is something, obviously, that bothers me very deeply and very personally. I think that there are a number of great teachers that are choosing to leave this state, not because of the salary, but because of the class sizes. And our neighboring state, Arkansas, has some really great restrictions on class sizes as it affects transportation, as it affects the funding, and truly, I mean, I know firsthand, intimately, how many of my friends have either left education altogether or have left our geography for a better job because of class sizes. And so I think that's something that is actually very reasonable to expect of our legislature, to protect the classroom environment for the most optimal learning to happen and to occur.
I think it's got to be focusing on revenue so that we can fund those education initiatives. It's got to be the Medicaid expansion, looking at elimination of the capital gains tax and other reoccurring resources so that we can fund education and core services like public safety. We cannot continue down the path that we are without that revenue in place in the budget. And I talk on the doors to folks a lot. We right now, unfortunately, can't have nice things in the state of Oklahoma. We can't work on a paid family leave bill or equal pay as easily, or looking at some things on elder care issues or mental health until we right the ship. And so the first pieces of legislation out the door have got to be focused on the budget and revenue.
I'm going to go off script here. I think revenue is also important, but I think we need to get more specific about that. So talk about exactly what you think we need to do in Oklahoma to deal with our revenue problem. And I think we're ready to go with Danielle first.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah. So I just mentioned a few of those things. Medicaid expansion has got to be top of the list. We saw Virginia do it a few weeks ago. The original arguments that it would hurt the state and cause financial distress. We've seen so many other states take the expansion, and that has not played out. That was a narrative that just simply isn't true. It's time to do it. I mean, it's ridiculous not to at this point. We also have looked at the capital gains exemption. That needs to be eliminated. In addition to that, I believe there are other tax credits and exemptions that studies have been done on that we're not seeing the return on our investment. Those should be looked at, evaluated, and eliminated if we're not getting our money's worth out of them. I had another one just a minute ago. Let me think. Medicaid expansion, capital gains exemption, GPT. Thank you. Wow. We've both been knocking doors today as well, so you'll have to excuse us. Yes, thank you. Gross production tax. It's up to 5%. It should go up more. It's interesting when you talk to people on the doors, I'm sure Carri hears this too, you get a lot of energy executives and oil and gas folks who are like, it won't hurt our jobs. Please raise it. And so yes, that also needs to go up. In an ideal world, personal income tax would be the way to quickly bring revenue to our state, especially on high earners. But that is not in my opinion today, that is not a reality in our current legislature environment. So I don't want to talk about things that we can't actually influence and make happen at the moment. But I know a lot of people are passionate about that.
Well, I am going to talk about that because, I'm a student of history, and I like to think, what actually got us in this problem? And, there were two things that Fallon did early on in her administration that, to me, caused these recurring budget shortfalls. And restoring the income tax has to be a part of that. Because, that was kind of what triggered it down. And I know that we were entering a time of economic downturn. And so this was, phrased as a way ultimately to help the economy rebound. And that's also when we lowered GPT to 2% from 7%. And so I think those are the two things that you say, we tried it and it didn't work. So now we need to, like you said, right the ship, and we need to fix those things and own those mistakes and say, now we've got some recurring revenue problems, and we've had mid-year budget shortfalls, and I just hear shortfall all the time, and in school it's like duck and cover, like something's going, so to me I think those are the two things that we go after hard right out of the gate, is restoring that income tax and restoring GPT.
Okay, so I want to get into something a little more immediately topical, and it's kind of a long question, so bear with me. Last week, California announced that state-sponsored or state-funded travel to Oklahoma would be banned based on a 2017 law there affecting states that authorize discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. This is a result of the passage in the last legislature of Senate Bill 1140, which has been referred to, and that bill prohibits private child placement agencies that receive state or federal funding from being required to participate in child placements that, quote, violate the agency's written religious or moral convictions or policies, unquote. Now, other states may follow suit. Briefly discuss how you think this will impact us and how our state government should address backlash to this and other religiously motivated policies. And we'll begin with Carri.
Well, you know, the separation of church and state happened a long time ago. Whether people want to acknowledge that in Oklahoma or not, that's our reality. And so I'm really disheartened, obviously, that this was even introduced, that it made it out of committee, and then not only that, but it was signed into law. It affects so many people in our community so deeply. And it bothers me. I mean, just from that human aspect, that we would say there are children in need of a loving home, and we are going to carve out a segment of people who could provide that love, that care, and that attention and support to this child because of this, you know? And I mean, good on California. I mean, truly, we need to be called out. It is absolutely terrifying that we live in a state that is proud of the fact that they achieved this piece of legislation. And to me, I mean, like I said, thank you for calling us out and saying it will not be tolerated. We will not send any business your way until you figure out how to handle the business. Truly, at this point, we shouldn't be surprised. I feel like we get whatever's coming to us because it's absolutely outrageous that this is still happening in the times that we live in. I'm just so deeply disturbed by it.
It is disturbing and embarrassing, you know, and this isn't the first time we've seen this, right? You know, Senate Bill 1140 is just the tip of the iceberg in a long list of discriminatory legislation that's been introduced that's embarrassed us across the country. You know, I was the former head of HR for Teleflora here locally, and one of my job requirements was that I was fortunate enough to talk to our highest level executives when we were recruiting them to move to Oklahoma. And that was trying 5 years ago, before all of this happened. You know, you would talk to somebody, great company, they were excited about the job, and then they would start researching Oklahoma City and sometimes be a little discouraged by what they read online regarding the quality of our education or, you know, embarrassing bills. So this is a big problem, not in just this one bill in Senate Bill 1140, which is tragic for children and families and unjust and hateful. And you know, we're seeing California, as Carri said, rightfully so, calling us out. But this is just one of years of this kind of behavior. We saw similar backlash over permitless carry from the NBA and other cities. We've seen, I believe it's North Carolina, where businesses have pulled out or tournaments have pulled out because of similar type of legislation. This has a huge economic impact on us every time a story like this runs. I'm pretty sure I remember Troy posting something regarding Freedom Oklahoma and getting calls from Amazon during that recruiting process in consideration of our city. So we have got to put a stop to these kinds of stories. Not only do they hurt people and individuals, and that's the real tragedy here, but the long-term economic impact on our state is horrible and almost immeasurable. And you see that when you see the chambers coming out against a lot of this stuff too and speaking out.
Okay, this is going to be my last question, and after it's answered, we'll go to audience questions. So be thinking, keep listening, but be thinking about what you might want to ask. What do you think the term progressive means in the context of our current political reality? And we'll start with Danielle.
So I was able with Leslie to attend the Progressive Change Committee candidate training not too long ago and have been endorsed as a bold progressive candidate nationally. And so to me, being a progressive is fighting for working families, which we do as a union family day in and day out. It's fighting for women and equality issues. It's making sure that there's a good quality education and affordable higher education available to folks. It is making sure that that everybody has access to and can afford healthcare coverage. It is making sure that everybody is treated fair and equally and gets a fair shake in this state. There are just so many ways that we can move the needle forward here in Oklahoma. And it won't all happen at one time. And some of the things that we might like to see as progressives happen very quickly and all in one swoop, we're going to have to work at a little more incrementally. You know, sadly here, when I talk about things like equal pay that I worked on for a few years or paid family leave, Oklahoma is never on the cutting edge. I used to be well prepared going into questions with elected officials when they say, well, who's done this? Well, everybody but us in surrounding states. So, you know, when we had the lowest grade for paid family leave of any state, including the ones that bordered us, and that was even because that our state employees, if you had been employed by the state of Oklahoma for a year, and part of the way through that year you delivered a child, you wouldn't qualify for FMLA. And even our surrounding states recognized that that wasn't fair. That pregnancy needed to be, or adoption, you needed to be able to have FMLA protection despite the fact you hadn't been there a year yet. And so our surrounding states were offering paid family leave or at least getting rid of that 1 year requirement. So we are never, ever on the cutting edge of what could be considered progressive legislation or even moderate legislation. So we have many examples to learn from across the country on a variety of different issues that will help improve our state.
The story you just described is my family. I am that pregnant female. I just had a child 4 months ago. I had 4 weeks of leave from my job. And it was expected, I mean, obviously before I was even medically released from my doctor, to be back in the classroom with my students. And it was, because that's what working families do day in and day out. We just make it work. We put on a great big smiley face and pretend that everything's okay, but we know the ship is sinking. It fuels my passion in this race so deeply because I am that working union member. I'm a proud member of the Oklahoma Education Association, and I have been since I entered the classroom. My father continues to be an Oklahoma Retired Education Association member, and he was a member for 32 years when he was in the classroom. And as a progressive, I have not accepted any PAC money on this campaign except for the OEA PAC money, which is, again, my proud union roots. I've actually successfully run this campaign on over 420 small donors with the average donation less than $100 to our campaign. And I think that speaks volumes about what a grassroots movement is and what a progressive candidate can do and accomplish when they come from a place of personal conviction and passion.
Okay, so on the schedule we have questions from the audience, which I anticipate to be about 10 or 15 minutes, and then the closing statements, and then announcements. It's been suggested that we take a short break to take care of business as necessary, get something else to drink. The bar is still open, so I'm going to leave that to our candidates if they're up for that. Okay, so let's 5 minutes. Is that enough?
By the way, I want everybody to give Cathy a hand for opening her restaurant. And then I would like to say that I want to pat us on the back too for coming up with this idea with Cathy one night sitting in this restaurant. It may have been after the third glass of wine, I'm not sure, but who's counting? Our organization is more than proud to organize an event like this. We are about electing strong Democrat progressives to office, and we're thrilled to have both of these women here to discuss their positions. I'd like to introduce real quickly the president of our organization right here, Mark Henriksen, an attorney here in town, and he's the head of our board, and we're thrilled to have him. And of course, Leslie Osborne. Applause God. Let me clear that up.
There's only one Leslie.
I got my brain for what's been going on. Leslie Bonebreak, stand up. Canada, 53. If Leslie was here, I wouldn't. She'd be out the door. Anyway, that's just me. But thank you all again for coming. On the tables are our application forms for membership. We're not asking for any specific amount. If you're interested in our organization, what we're trying to do here right now, we're working on a potential ballot initiative to move our city to 12 wards. We're working right now with the mayor's office and city council people. It's time to democratize our city. 8 councilors since 1927, and our population has tripled plus in that period of time. We need better representation, stronger relationships with the voters, so and the citizens of our city. So anyway, consider it. Thanks.
Okay, we're gonna go to some questions now. I just want to ask you, please make sure that it is a question, and keep it as short as you can. You can choose whether to direct it at one or both of the candidates. Okay. I saw a hand over here. I said that.
Ladies, we're so grateful that you're running, and thank you for being such strong, progressive women. We want both of your representations, but that's unfortunately not going to be able to happen. So my question is, after one of you gets voted in, because one of you will, how will you support the one that won?
Well, like I said before, I think when you vote for us, you get 2 individuals who will probably vote pretty similarly if elected. So I think it's important that we work together going forward. I'm a very collaborative person. My style is to solicit feedback from subject matter experts and people, community leaders, and anybody I can who will help me learn, understand every aspect of an issue. And I certainly would love to work with Carri going forward on public education. Her perspective from the classroom is very different from mine, having been a higher ed adjunct or as a community volunteer. So I think we have a lot to offer each other, and I look forward to working with her.
I actually got this question on the door. She's here, I think. Maybe. Where she is. There were 2 of them. You knock the door, and you never know who's going to answer. And obviously, I met one of your canvassers, and she asked me that question. I'm working for Danielle, and if she gets elected, will you support her? And I thought, man, I'm getting worked over at the door. But anyways, that was the first time, honestly, that anyone had asked me that. And so I think it's a really important and needed question to be asked. Because, notably, our skin is on the line right now. And obviously this campaign is fueled by passion and work ethic. And when you are on the doors for 8 to 10 hours a day and on the phones for 1 to 2 hours a day, and, in my case, I'm in my, child rearing hours of the day too, with 3 babies. It's just so personal, right? So I would need some time, obviously, to kind of pick myself back up. But ultimately, I think Danielle does have, some additional experience that I don't. And so I think that Senate District 40 can rest assured that they will have an incredible Democratic candidate moving forward, and I hope that it's me.
I failed to ask your name.
Jeannie Lowry.
Jeannie Lowry. Okay, thank you, Jeannie. When you ask your question, state your name first, please. I saw a hand over here. There you go.
Lindsay Canale, and
One of my number one issues, voting issues for me, is criminal justice. I'm a criminal justice undergrad. I want to know, it's kind of a two-part question. What have you done prior to running that involved criminal justice advocacy? And then also, two, if you're elected, what would you do? What legislation would you support? Or what legislation would you author to actually make a difference in real criminal justice reform?
I love this question because it's so needed, and in my opinion, just so common sense that there are just some really what I consider small changes that could impact thousands of lives. I don't understand why offenders that are serving sentences on crimes that have now, the sentences have been lessened, why they're still serving sentences. If they were tried today, it wouldn't be the same penalty. That to me is a no-brainer, and it's costing us a lot of money as taxpayers. I also think we need to move as far away from for-profit prisons as possible. Yeah. I don't know how you can make a profit off of locking someone up. It bothers me. And I think also, we look at nonviolent offenses in the light of why are we locking people up or putting people in jail or prisons for a nonviolent offense when they don't have access to quality rehabilitation services? I think you got to look at the reasons for why the offenses are being committed, and you start there as a solution-oriented approach towards criminal justice, because that to me represents reform.
Well, as I said earlier, criminal justice reform is one of the areas that I've worked on the last few years. I sit on the board of Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform, Chris Steele's organization, and continue my work in that area. So 2 years ago, when I joined the Women's Coalition, we were one of the many partners fighting to pass State Question 780 and 781. So I spoke frequently in support of those two state questions that year, was with Brad Henry and others doing town hall meetings across the state. I'm very passionate about this issue. We must take a smarter approach. It's ridiculous to have the overpopulation we're facing today, the costs associated with it, and as Carrie mentioned, really not looking at alternatives to incarceration and a smarter approach. Today, for the last 30 years, Oklahoma has been has had the highest incarceration rate for women at 2.5 times the national average, and this year our male incarceration rate joined that figure. So we must take a smarter approach. Thankfully, 2 sessions ago, I spent a lot of my time at the Capitol fighting to keep State Question 780 and 781 in place. What a waste of time to spend a session where so many people, so many dedicated individuals, Reverend Walke was up there a lot with us, we had to spend a lot of time fighting to keep the vote that we all said yes to in place. And we've got to stop doing that in this state. It's ridiculous. So fortunately, there is a criminal justice task force in place that came out with a long list of recommendations. Many of those we saw pass this session, not as much as we'd like to. So we should start seeing the impact, although we have not yet, of those changes, as well as 780 and 781 passing. Now remember, those are 2 bills for criminal justice reform. One that was hopefully going to lower incarceration rates by lowering or changing the laws around many of those crimes, so possession, embezzlement, and other things, taking them from a felony to a misdemeanor. But the second part of that bill was to take the savings that we had from changing those sentences and start having additional diversion programs and other programs to finally stop the cycle of incarceration we have in this state. So moving forward, there is a long laundry list of recommendations from the task force that we will continue to advocate for and see going forward. I mentioned fees and fines earlier. That happens to be an issue I'm particularly passionate about. I heard a woman testify in an interim study once talking about how, she came out of several years of incarceration with about $40,000 in fines. I used to think my student loan debt I'd never get out from under. I can't even fathom coming out of prison with a low employment probability, challenges getting to and from work, finding housing, and then having $40,000 in debt on top of that. And she told a story about how she was imprisoned in one county and didn't make a court appearance in another and was fined for it. So it's absolutely ridiculous, that situation today. Every person and system you touch after you've been arrested is assessing these individuals' fees and fines, and and then frequently they are unable to pay and put back into prison or jail.
Anything down here? Okay.
You gotta get one from the radical left. The revolutionaries here in the audience are going to get one. Of course, I don't think this is a revolutionary topic.
Your name?
Susan McCann. Colin Walkie introduced several populist progressive bills last year. We were right there with him. Very, very pleased for that. One of them in particular was of interest to us, was raising the minimum wage. We have a state which surrounding states have already surpassed. Our great hostess here, yes, there she is, wave your hand. She lived on minimum wage over a very long and tedious period of time with her husband here in the Oklahoma City area. I hope if you haven't seen her video, you should. And lived on that minimum wage. It was over even, I believe, Thanksgiving holidays and so on. It was grueling, you all, grueling. There are a lot of people here in our city that need to have that opportunity, and in our entire state, who are living in poverty and living on poverty wages, which $7.25 an hour is. So I want to see what your position is on whether or not you would back a strong legislation on raising the minimum wage, whether or not you would help to gather people, other Democrats, to join with you on that, and what you consider a minimum wage should be, our minimum wage should be raised to here in Oklahoma. So.
Every year in reading the bills when they come out, there are several elected officials, including Representative Walkie, championing an increase in the minimum wage. And sadly, those bills never see the light of day in committee. But I also do believe that minimum wage needs to increase. It is one way to help many working families. It disproportionately hurts women in our state who are already making, on average, between 73 and 77 cents to the dollar of their male counterparts. This has got to change going forward. $15 an hour is one figure that is frequently talked about nationally. I would like to see that happen. I'm not sure, though, incrementally. I know a lot of states like Arkansas, when I was still in my old capacity over HR at Teleflora, Arkansas had passed a bill that helped, that raised the minimum wage, but did it incrementally over a few years. Now, we would like to see it go higher and more quickly, but I think the realistic approach that might be a little easier to pass here, and that maybe with the help of the chambers getting behind, would be an incremental approach so that employers like Cathy could start adjusting to that over a number of years.
In a lot of ways, kind of what you're speaking to, Danielle, I feel like that's why teachers are paid so poorly. It has been a female-dominated profession for so long. My dad was always in the minority as a male in the classroom for 32 years.
There's an elected official who told me that your teaching salary is a second income. So you really don't need it. Don't worry about it, Carri. It's going to be okay. You don't need that.
Oh, don't you do camps and don't you do, and how can you supplement? I'm a working professional. I'm certified. I have 2 master's degrees to teach 5-year-olds, truly, because my master's is in early childhood education, because I believe that you've got to have the most qualified individuals instructing our smallest learners. And so, when we look at minimum wage in the state, it's no wonder that we have so many problems. Families are struggling to get by, teachers among them, state employees among them. We're so disheartened that, nothing came for state employees during the walkout.
And so, I mean, I do support $15 an hour. In fact, that's what I'm paying on my campaign, because I believe so firmly in making sure that people have a living wage. You know, $15 an hour is reasonable. Bills are so expensive, and if you're not willing to put your money where your mouth is, then you're going to get the work that you're paying for, which is what I think we're seeing in our public school system.
Hi, I'm Reverend Lori Walkie, and one of the reasons I'm here is that my quality of life would improve if my husband had better colleagues. Actively working for that. And I'm actually probably one of the only people in the room that can't vote in this primary, but I know that one of you will be one of the people I could possibly vote for in the general. So my question for you is, why do you think your campaign could beat a Republican incumbent?
Yes.
You know, when this conversation started in January of 2017, and obviously we were looking at what was coming for the legislative session, and, you know, I was combing through bills after bills and looking at what was going to happen to education, and so I set some meetings with the Senate Education Committee members, and so I took personal days. And I know there's some teachers out here in the room who can attest that those personal days are like gold, to be able to go down to the Capitol and advocate on behalf of my students. And what I was met with was just bold arrogance of their ignorance of the issue. And as I'm literally just introducing myself to one of the Senate Education Committee members, you know, hi, my name is Carri Hicks. I teach in Deer Creek schools. I have 28 students in each of my math classes this year. And he put his hand in my face and told me I was lying. That he knew the average class size in Oklahoma was 16 students. And I mean, I'm going, it has not been 16 students for a very long time. I don't know where, you know, you're. And I'm also a math teacher, so I can teach you with a lot of averages. However, like, let's not get derailed by the main issue here. And so I was just so disappointed, you know, that people would just boldly not understand the issues and be unwilling to hear myself and my colleagues who were there to explain the truth. And so I called my husband and I said, I think we're running for office. I think this is going to happen. I need to make a couple phone calls, but I think that this needs to happen because people just have no idea, that they have no idea. And so, you know, I sat down with my campaign team and we started running the numbers. And I said, you know, here's the thing. Like, I'm absolutely in the thick of it as a mom, and as a teacher, you always are in the thick of it. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's your 7th year, your 1st year, your 18th year, you're always in the thick of it. But I just needed to know, is this feasible? Is this doable? And as we looked at the 2014 campaign data, you know, this area was so blue. And not only that, currently, 4 of the 5 representatives, your husband being one of them, is a Democrat inside this district. And so to me, it is absolutely the right time to have the best candidate on the ballot that can speak to the issues that are on the minds and the hearts of Oklahomans today.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, as Carri said, this district is incredibly flippable. It's actually 3 out of 5 that are Democrats today. Representative Wilkie, Representative Dunnington, and Cindy Munson. Those districts represent 75% of the active voters in the state. So 75% of the active voters, in the state, in the Senate District 40 today, are represented by one of those 3 people. So this district, as Carri said, is very purple. It is primed to be flipped. It was a 1-point difference between Trump and Clinton in the presidential. Everything points to us being able to win this seat. Now, that said, we have to have candidates who have the experience needed to win it, who are used to and have proven that they can work across the aisle, who will appeal to both Democratic and Republican voters. And I believe I am that person. As a former corporate leader here in the city, I've worked on budgets. I know how not only to represent the people who aren't in the room, but how to pay for them and to make ends meet. And I have that background in MBA with an emphasis in finance. And I think that's important going forward, given the state of things here in Oklahoma. In addition to that, I have the community experience. I've worked on, we talked a lot about criminal justice reform tonight. That's a very bipartisan issue. We hear about that a lot on the doors. When I talk to, a lot of times when we're knocking, we're talking to Republican spouses. These issues that our state is facing are not partisan. Both Republicans and Democrats want to see want to see criminal justice reform. They want good public schools. And most of all, they want to see their elected officials making long-term decisions that move our state forward, not maintain the status quo. And they're tired of these embarrassing discriminatory bills like Senate Bill 1140, the adoption bill. So I think they will. We've seen with a Collins race and Cindy Munson's before that, they respect the hard work that a candidate like Carri and I are willing to do. We have knocked or talked to or had over 21,000 contacts with voters in this district. We collected 1,100 signatures from Republicans and Democrats who wanted to see my name on the ticket, and we've raised almost $100,000 for this race. It's a $200,000 race to take on Senator Yen, in our estimates based on what's happened before. So this district is winnable. I'm seeing those contributions coming in from both sides, for both Republicans and Democrats. I have strong bipartisan support in this district and can win it.
All right.
I'm going to take one more question, and I saw a hand over here. Okay, start with your name.
Thank you. My name is Susan Mendes, and I have two questions, which I think I should get to ask because I'm a woman. Men have been in control for a long time. So my first question is, as a recently retired, long-time employee of the Oklahoma State Department of Health, I'm well aware that as a recently retired, long-time employee of the Oklahoma State Department of Health, I'm well aware that all state agencies' budgets have been cut from 28 to 40% in the last 10 years. But I also support Republicans saying they will audit every state agency. I would wonder if you would support, with your Republican colleagues, auditing every state agency on a regular basis. Thank you. You want my second question? Yeah. Thank you. Would you support and advocate for incremental changes to bring Oklahoma into the cutting edge and by providing universal health care? Thank you.
Okay, candidates, just pick which question you want to answer.
Oh gosh. Okay. So the first question was about state agencies and audits and efficiencies. And first of all, Susan, I wanted to mention that I would also support cost of living increases for our state agency retirees and teachers. I know I mentioned, my husband's with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I've been endorsed by AFL-CIO. In a lot of those contracts, retirees as well as current employees get annual increases or increases that are tied to other index factors, and that should be happening here in this state. I don't know, I think you mentioned you haven't been retired for very long, but I imagine that your current income level without those increases may not be sufficient year in and year out going forward in 10 years from now to pay those bills. So it's something that we have to address. It's not fair for you to have worked till retirement, given and been dedicated to a state agency and not be compensated with those increases over time. So I did want to address that.
On the audits, there are a lot of different ways that state agencies are audited today. I think we need to look at those a little deeper and make sure that every organization is running efficiently. You know, for any of us that have worked in any capacity in any organization, whether that's nonprofit, for-profit, or a state agency, we can always be more efficient and run things better and do things in a more efficient and effective way, possibly with fewer funds. I don't think that's the, you know, our agencies are underfunded today. They have faced too many cuts. But that's not to say that there aren't innovations in technology or processes or other things that could be used in those organizations to help them run a little more efficiently and cut costs. And I think that's a process. You know, I have a business consulting career with my partner Jean at the Matisse Group, and we talk a lot to our for-profit growing companies about how to run more efficiently and lean and do things more effectively. And I believe that's a conversation that should go on all the time. Unfortunately, our schools have had to do that day in and day out. They've had no choice. And I think in a lot of our state agencies, we're seeing that as well. So we've got to reduce funding, but that's not to say that any organization put under the microscope couldn't do a little better every single day.
In a little bit of my background, obviously with auditing, as I was serving in an advisory capacity to an organization that has poured into me, I discovered that there was a lot of missing funds. And so I actually had to federally testify to $60,000 that was missing in an organization that I hold dear. And so, you know, I have seen it, and that was with my sorority. And, you know, anyways, I have that unfortunate experience of having been, you know, running the numbers and going, something's wrong, something's not adding up. And as I took leadership of the organization, I actually poured some money into a forensic audit to make sure that we had our P's and Q's in order, and we didn't. And so, you know, we were able to restore that money back into our budget. So, you know, as Danielle mentioned, I mean, in education, we have one of the most transparent agencies, you know, and it should be. We have a large portion of the state budget, and so people need to feel good about where their dollars are going, but, you know, it's been cut by 28%. It's a shrinking pie. So even though we are still getting, you know, a large portion of that state budget, there's just not enough slices to go around. And so, you know, we've got to increase our revenue. I think transparency is important for so many reasons. When we don't know how our dollars are being spent, we can't hold people accountable. And we hear that in education so often. They want accountability. You know, they're going to restore funding, but, you know, damn it, you guys better tell me where this money's going. You know, you better be proving those results on your test scores. And so, I mean, I think that's fair to ask for some transparency and making sure that people feel good about the revenue that we have in our state. And right now, I don't feel good about it because I know that there's not enough money to go around. As far as universal health care is concerned, I stand kind of in the middle, I guess. I feel like if we're going to give the Affordable Care Act a fair shake in Oklahoma, we either attract multiple providers to the marketplace, which is currently controlled by one, that gets to set their prices, or you make it a single payer system, so that, again, everyone gets a fair shake. So to me, I don't understand how you can have a marketplace with one provider. It just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense.
Okay, we're going to go to question. We're going to go to announcements now. You're welcome to afterward. I'm hoping that the candidates will stay around and talk to you personally. But we do need to move along. So I'm going to start by just reiterating that Our Revolution Oklahoma, which put this event together, is a local organization that meets regularly. We have 4 active committees. We have a ballot initiative committee, Susan referenced. We have a Transforming Politics committee, and we have a candidate support committee, and then we have the communications committee, which I work on, and which sort of helps the other committees and the organization function and say what it needs to say. So I invite you to use the yellow forms and join us, support us, and get involved. So I'm going to give first the candidates an opportunity to make any announcements about upcoming canvassing events or fundraisers that their campaigns may be have coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Thanks. So we have canvassing opportunities every weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So Saturday mornings as well as Sunday afternoons. If you hit our Facebook page, and that is the best way to see those listed. In addition to that, we have folks out in the evenings every night now as well. So plenty of opportunities. We can work with you and your schedule. If you're interested in volunteering, we'd love to have you. In addition to that, as far as events coming up, we have a fundraiser on Tuesday night, June the 12th at Saints. So please come and join us there. It starts at 5:30.
Your website and Facebook name?
Yeah, so everything is on the Facebook page.
Called?
Yeah, what is it called? Ezelle for Senate. Thank you. Wow, it's been a busy day. What is my name? Ezelle for Senate. Thank you, Leslie. But everything is listed there. In addition to that, primary night, we will be down the street at Sean Cummings Pub to watch the results come in. And I'm going to look at Chelsea, who, did I miss anything? Because I know there is just a lot going on at this point in the campaign.
We have notaries here for.
Oh, that's right. And so if anybody brought their ballots, we have notaries. The Chris are in the wave. Yeah. So if you guys need your absentee ballots notarized,
Yes, absolutely.
we can help you there. They will also be with us at Saints if you want to stop in. I know I need to get mine done. So please spread the word if you hear people saying that they need to get their ballot notarized. We are happy to help you, or call us and we will send somebody to you. So.
And if you are at all interested in volunteering in any capacity, whether it be driving Danielle, myself, other volunteers, we have a lot of opportunities coming up, from phone banking to putting stickers on our door hangers. Please just let me know. I will help you help us. So, and feel free to join the Friends of Danielle Facebook group. That's a really good way to stay active and involved in what's going on in the campaign, and especially with all of our social issues or events coming up.
And I always like to warn people, don't give Chelsea your cell phone. My brother felt the need tonight to take a selfie of the two of us and send it to her as proof that he had helped me because she was calling him. A lot of accountability.
We have a Drinks and Dials event coming up, because who doesn't like a good cold beer right after work? It'll be at 5:30 on June 12th. You can stop by our campaign offices for that event. Like Danielle, we're out canvassing all day, every day. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach out to us on Facebook, Carri Hicks for Senate, or carrihicks.com, spelled CarriHicks.com. You can sign up to volunteer. We've got a lot of really cool things going on within the campaign. I think bagels and barnstorming is also on the horizon, because we love alliteration. So you can find out more details about that on our pages as well.
Okay, who else has an announcement? Any progressive stuff going on? David? David?
I just wanted to mention, everybody, I run the website badvoter.org. It lets you see how many days that you or anyone has last voted in Oklahoma. But it also lets you look at a sample ballot, check your registration, change your registration. You can also sign up for absentee ballots there.
Is it too late to get an absentee ballot?
No, you can get it up till Wednesday before the election. I think everybody, even if you love going to the polls, should sign up for absentee ballot for this reason. It's the ultimate reminder that there's an election coming up. You have to do it every year, and you have to have it notarized if you want to use it. But you can just use it as a reminder and not vote it and still go to your polls. They'll have you sign something that says you didn't vote it. But it's the ultimate reminder, and there's just no better way to remember what's going on. Also, there's a lot of stuff on this election. I already have my absentee ballot in. I promise you there's different things that you haven't researched as well. It might be corporation commission or county commissioner or labor commissioner or judges, and it's great to actually do the research ahead of time. So click vote by mail. Also, you can sign up for reminders, and you can click that and you'll get a text or email reminder. Basically, there's no reason not to vote, but highly recommend that you also know that your voting record's public. And on June 27th, we can see everybody that didn't vote. So that's kind of exciting. So go to badvoter.org and click all 4 or 5 things and try to never miss an election. Thanks a lot.
Hello, everyone. I'm Leslie Bonebrake. I'm running for House District 53 and more.
And she's endorsed by our Revolutionary.
I am. Not only am I a member, but I've been endorsed. And I'm just really happy that I'm not on this side of the table tonight. All right, but I want to let everyone know we're having a potluck next Wednesday in Norman, Oklahoma. There are some little quarter flyers here you're welcome to pick up if you're interested in attending. It's potluck and silent auction. We have a slate of progressive candidates down there. Kevin Hammond, who's running for sheriff, myself, and Caitlin Dockery, who's Northmore, just north of me. So we're forming the Blue Crescent and just going to sweep Oklahoma blue this midterm. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else? Last chance. I want to thank again our 2 candidates for participating in this, doing such a great job. And I know whichever one is going to get elected in November, it's going to make us proud. Thank you again for coming. I hope we can do this again.
Thank you.
Yes, very